My name is Evelyn Parker.
And before you decide what kind of mother I was, before you decide whether my daughter was right or wrong, I want you to understand one thing very clearly. I never raised my children to worship success. I raised them to survive, to endure, to stay kind when life wasn't. And maybe, that's exactly what she now calls my failure. If you've ever been judged by the very person you sacrificed everything for, stay with me. And before I begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever heard a sentence from your own child that stayed with you longer than any insult from a stranger ever could? If yes, leave a comment and subscribe. This channel is for stories like ours. Now let me tell you what happened on Mother's Day. I was not always invisible.
In my 20s, I was sharp.
Ambitious. I worked as a junior architect for a small but promising firm in Chicago. I loved the smell of blueprints and fresh coffee, the quiet confidence of knowing my ideas mattered. Then I got pregnant with Natalie. Her father left before she learned to walk.
No dramatic exit.
Just a slow disappearance that ended with a locked voicemail and unpaid child support. I had a choice. I could fight to keep my career alive, or I could raise my daughter alone. I chose her. I left architecture. Took a clerical job at a community center. Later, a receptionist position at a dental office. Jobs that paid the bills but never came with applause. But Natalie grew up safe. Federal. Educated. Loved. I thought that would be enough.
Natalie was brilliant.
Straight A's. Scholarships. Ivy League ambition from the moment she learned what those words meant. She learned early how to introduce herself with confidence, how to network, how to look impressive.
And somewhere along the way, she learned how to look down.
At me.
It started small.
Correcting the way I spoke. Rolling her eyes when I talked about my job. Changing the subject when someone asked what I did for a living. I told myself it was a phase. I was wrong. Natalie invited me to lunch that year.
A restaurant downtown.
Trendy. Loud. The kind of place where menus didn't list prices and conversations were about stock options and promotions. She arrived late. Sat down. Smiled politely. "Happy Mother's Day," she said, handing me a small gift bag without meeting my eyes. I thanked her and tried to enjoy the moment. But then she started talking. About her new role. Her salary. Her friends who were doing so well. And then she laughed. "You know," she said, swirling her wine, "sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if you'd actually done something with yours." I froze. "I mean," she continued, lowering her voice just enough to sound reasonable, "you had potential. But you let it go.
You chose mediocrity."
I felt heat rise in my chest. "I chose you," I said quietly. She sighed. "That's exactly what I mean," she replied. "You always say that like it's an achievement." Then she leaned back and said the words that shattered something inside me. "You're a failure, Mom." The table went silent. Not just ours, nearby tables felt it too.
The sudden tension.
The emotional vacuum. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I did not defend myself. I looked at her. Not with anger. Not with hatred. But with a calm that comes only after a lifetime of sacrifice. I saw her flinch. Because in that moment, she realized something she hadn't expected. She had crossed a line. What Natalie didn't know, what she had never bothered to ask, was what I gave up. The offers I turned down. The projects I never took. The version of myself that never got to exist. And what she didn't know was that the truth has a way of surfacing when arrogance speaks too loudly. Because my silence that day was not weakness. It was the beginning of her reckoning.
Natalie broke eye contact first.
She laughed awkwardly, the kind of laugh people use when they realize they may have gone too far but refuse to admit it. She picked up her phone, pretending to read a message, while I sat there feeling the weight of every year I had chosen quiet stability over visible success. I paid for my own meal, stood up calmly, and told her I needed to leave. She did not stop me. She did not apologize. She simply nodded, already moving on, already convinced she had spoken the truth. That night, alone in my small apartment, I replayed her words again and again, not because I believed them, but because I finally understood how she saw me. To her, my sacrifices were invisible. My choices were mistakes. And my love was expected, not respected. What Natalie never knew was that I had never truly failed at architecture. I had been offered a partnership years before she was born, a rare opportunity for someone so young, but it required relocation, endless travel, and a life that left no room for a child. When her father disappeared, the firm did not revoke the offer. I declined it. Quietly.
Without drama. I chose certainty over prestige.
That decision followed me like a shadow, not because I regretted it, but because no one ever saw it. A week after Mother's Day, Natalie posted a long message online celebrating strong women who choose ambition and refuse to settle. The comments poured in. Praise. Applause. People calling her inspiring. Someone asked about me. She replied publicly, "My mom did her best, but she never pushed herself." I learned from that. That comment spread faster than she expected. Old colleagues of mine saw it. Former classmates. Even my first mentor from the architecture firm. One of them messaged me privately. "Evelyn," he wrote, "I didn't know you left because of Natalie. We still talk about the designs you submitted back then. You were one of the best minds we had." I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I needed validation, but because Natalie had unknowingly reopened a door she thought was permanently closed. A few days later, she called me, frantic. A senior executive at her company had recognized my name. He remembered me from a conference years ago, remembered a proposal I had drafted that later influenced one of their flagship projects. He asked Natalie if we were related. She had laughed it off at first, but now the truth was circling closer. "Mom," she said sharply on the phone, "did you ever work with Thomas Reed?" I paused. "Yes," I said simply. "Why?"
Silence.
Then her voice dropped. "He's my regional director. He asked why I never mentioned you." That was the first crack.
She came over that evening, restless, pacing my living room like a stranger.
"Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded. "Because you never asked," I replied. "And because my life choices were never meant to be your resume." She scoffed.
"You let me believe you wasted your potential."
I met her gaze steadily.
"You assumed it."
Her anger shifted into something else. Fear. Because for the first time, she realized the narrative she had built her identity on might be incomplete. Over the next weeks, more people reached out. Former co-workers. Old clients. They spoke kindly. Respectfully. And Natalie watched it all unfold from a distance she could not control. At a company dinner, someone toasted Evelyn Parker's influence on early urban redesign concepts.
Natalie froze mid-smile. That night, she confronted me again.
"Do you know how this makes me look?" she asked. I took a breath. "For years, you didn't care how I looked," I said. "Only how you did." She snapped back, defensive, accusing me of embarrassing her, of resurfacing at the worst possible time. And that's when I finally said the words I had swallowed for decades. "I didn't fail, Natalie," I said calmly. "I chose differently. And you don't get to turn that choice into a weapon." She stared at me, stunned, as if seeing me for the first time not as a background figure, but as a person with a history she had erased. Her confidence cracked. Not loudly. Quietly. And that silence felt heavier than any argument we had ever had. Natalie did not apologize after that conversation, not really. She pulled back instead, the way people do when they realize the ground beneath their certainty is no longer solid. Weeks passed with minimal contact, short messages about logistics, birthdays acknowledged with emojis instead of calls. Then came the company gala, the kind of polished, high-profile event Natalie had always dreamed of attending, where success was measured by who noticed you and who remembered your name. She invited me out of obligation, not warmth, insisting it would look good if her mother attended. I agreed, not because I needed the validation, but because I was done hiding. That night, standing in a simple black dress among tailored suits and practiced smiles, I felt oddly calm. Natalie introduced me to people quickly, vaguely, clearly uncomfortable whenever someone lingered too long. Then Thomas Reed approached us, glass in hand, eyes lighting up when he saw me. He greeted me warmly, spoke about projects we had worked on decades ago, praised my instincts, my discipline, my vision. People gathered. Natalie stood frozen beside me, her smile tightening with every word. Someone laughed and asked why I had ever left the field. I answered honestly, without bitterness, without drama. I became a mother, I said. The room fell into that familiar, heavy quiet, the one where truths land harder than insults. Natalie finally snapped. She laughed too loudly and said, "Well, she could have done both if she tried harder." That was when I looked at her. Not with anger.
Not with sadness.
With clarity. With the full weight of a life lived deliberately. The deadly stare people talk about isn't rage.
It's disappointment stripped of fear.
It's the look that says you see exactly who someone has chosen to be.
Natalie faltered mid-sentence.
Thomas Reed frowned. Others exchanged glances. I spoke softly, but everyone heard me. I did try, I said. I tried every day. I just didn't try to be someone I wasn't.
Natalie's face flushed.
She muttered something about needing air and walked away, leaving behind a silence she could no longer control. The next day, rumors followed her into the office.
Not cruel ones.
Honest ones. Questions about values. About respect. About character. Natalie called me that night, her voice shaking, not with anger this time, but with something closer to panic. She asked why I hadn't defended her. I told her I didn't attack her. I simply refused to lie. That was the moment she finally understood the cost of the word failure. Because failure isn't choosing a different path. Failure is standing on someone else's sacrifices and calling them small. She cried then, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the kind of quiet grief that comes when the story you've told yourself falls apart. And for the first time, she said the words she had never learned to say before. "I'm sorry."